I'm Jo Finnerty. I'm the Programme Manager for Adult Social Care Workforce at the Greater Manchester Health and Social Care Partnership. I'll let Sue introduce herself.
Hi, yeah, I'm Sue Wright, and I'm the GM Employability Project Manager. I was for Step Into Care. Thanks,
Sue. So we're going to talk you through the Step Into Care programme, which is a sector-based work academy. Give you a little bit of the background to why we set it up, how we set it up, particularly around the timing we set it up, and some of the outcomes and the challenges, the outcomes, but kind of where we intend to go with it next. We were fortunate enough, and we're really proud to have got a highly commended for the programme in terms of talent acquisition. So we're really pleased with that, and I think it was a real tribute to the hard work Sue's put in particular, but also the education provider and various other partners that have worked with us really closely on this, and not least of all the employers across social care and the participants who have just been amazing. So we'll hopefully give you a bit of a flavour of it all and the practicalities of how we went about it. Okay, could you move on to the next slide, Ellie? Thank you. So first of all, I just wanted to give a bit of a picture, I guess, for the challenges that we're facing in social care and have been for some time, that really prompted the creation of the programme. I mean, everybody I think on this call will be aware, and the challenges across health and social care in terms of recruiting, retaining, particularly in certain occupations. So for social care specifically, we've kind of never faced, I think, challenges as much as we are now. I mean, commissioners describe it as unprecedented. The Skills for Care data is just out for last year. So turnover, if we just look at care workers as a proportion of that workforce, the turnover for care workers was 36.4%, and vacancy levels are at 6.8%. As I say, that's for last year as a whole. It will be higher than that, certainly at the moment, because what we've seen over the last few months is people leaving the sector to sort of take up roles again in retail, hospitality. We see that every year as winter approaches, quite often. But this year, I think with the big incentives being offered, through a lot of those other sectors, we are really seeing a really concerning movement of staff and level of vacancies. So that figure won't reflect, like I say, on the situation of the last few months. But the challenges, as I say, across social care are high. In terms of vacancy levels, staff turnover, that's long-standing, and much of the work that the partnership is doing is really aimed at making care a better place to work, attracting people into care as a career. Loads of things happening around, for instance, introduction of a real living wage, creating blended health and care roles that offer better career pathways. So lots of work happening. But the ambition for Greater Manchester, going back to the sort of 2 years ago nearly now, was to create a sub-regional academy for social care, and an integral part of that was the creation of a Greater Manchester-wide sector-based work academy that creates that pipeline of people with the right values into social care and support them in careers. Could you move on to the next one, please, Ellie? Thank you. So I guess what is Step Into Care? It's effectively a sustainable, we hope, sector-based GM-wide re-employment programme with real potential to upscale, and that's certainly the conversations we're having at the moment. So in terms of the stakeholders in setting it up and running it, it's really a collaboration between the Greater Manchester Careers Hub, of which Sue was a part, the Greater Manchester Health and Social Care Partnership, and WEA, who are a voluntary sector education provider. So those were the key partners. DWP very closely involved in terms of that pipeline of people to sort of come through. Not the only way that people could come in, but they were clearly a key partner. And Skills for Care as expert advisors for the sector. You'll see that all our logos are on the bottom of the slide. So Health Education England and Greater Manchester Combined Authority were instrumental around funding for this. So through the adult education budget, and HEE funded kind of our part, if you like, in terms of the placement matching and employment side. Could you move on to the next one, please? So how did we start it? We launched in May 2020, so May last year, and the delivery plan, as I mentioned, had already identified this priority for creating a Greater Manchester-wide pre-employment offer to encourage people into the sector. And Sue had piloted a programme with Salford College early on last year. And I think in the evaluation of that, whilst it was brilliant, we recognised some of the challenges that came with it. So the challenge of a GM-wide programme for care is travelling, people moving to wherever the education part of the programme is. So people who work in care, I know Skills for Care always quote, they tend to live within about 5 miles of where they, where they work, or for some parts of the sector closer than that. So having people travel was always going to be a challenge. But also what was identified was training in an academic institution was off-putting for some people. So if those that were maybe furthest away from the workplace, if they'd had bad experiences in education, it was actually quite off-putting having that at a higher education institute or a college. So at the start of last year, we were preparing to develop what we wanted to have as a community-based model. So taking on the learning, I suppose, the best points from the GM-based pilot at Salford, with input from social care providers. So we started to shape what that pre-employment offer might look like. And our ambition around that was it would be a GM-wide offer, but we'd deliver it locally. So it would be very much community-based. It wouldn't be in academic environments. It would be in community settings. And it would be based around local knowledge. So what were CQC inspections saying? You know, what were some of the local initiatives that were being rolled out? And we needed to make sure we incorporated that into the education programme. And then we went into lockdown. So we had to then think about, obviously, well, what can we deliver that is online and that's going to support providers to recruit people with the right values into social care, and offer opportunities to those recently made redundant or furloughed that might actually be thinking about a change in career. So I guess the initial the initial thought we had was, right, we're going to have to pause this. And then it was, no, actually, this can really help. This can really help providers. Could you move on to the next one, please, Ali? Thank you. So, as I say, we needed to think about how can we support social care providers to recruit into roles that were very much needed at that point, with people that have had just that right amount of training, so they're prepared into that role. They know that it's something that they'd want to do, and we can support their pre-employment as much as possible to take away, if you like, from registered managers some of that kind of almost administrative, if you like, and pre-employment checking and so on that we could do. So bearing in mind this was largely care homes, so in May last year, sort of April, May last year, they were under incredible pressure, obviously, with what was happening, and an all in complete lockdown. So we needed to try and find something that sort of fit that balance, I guess, of what was needed. So we knew it needed to be online. So we needed to think about what skills can we teach people, if you like, online, to have them as work ready as possible, so that when they come into the role, they're as confident as they can be, that it's a career they want, that they've got some of those basic skills. But then also so providers can be sure that they're recruiting somebody who's got the right values, who understands what it means to work in social care and is a good fit for their organisation. It needed to work efficiently, because we needed to get people in quickly into jobs, or as quickly as possible, while still being safe in our recruitment processes. So I think the benefits overall of that for providers was about quick and safe recruitment at a point when they were obviously, you know, in a really challenging situation in terms of COVID, you know, within the care homes at that point. But then for participants, obviously the benefit was about people being back in employment and earning money again. And for some of them, you know, that might have been the first opportunity they'd had to work. Next slide, please, Ali. Thank you. So we work closely with providers across Greater Manchester to really start to shape that and develop it. And Sue will go through the programme shortly in a little bit more detail about what we did include. She met with all the organisations to get them on board, to listen to what they needed, because obviously that was really important, not just in the context of content for the education programme, but also around those values and what was important about people that will be coming in and working in those organisations. So initially the programme was aimed at largely aimed at care homes and supported living providers, but it has been extended into home care. I'll add the point here, home care is where the particular challenges around recruitment and retention currently. That's the area of the sector that's most challenged. It is also a big challenge for Step Into Care, and I think Sue will probably touch on it a little bit later, because some of the way that home care is commissioned predominantly means that you don't tend to have walking rounds. So some local authority areas have sort of started to commission slightly differently, so that is possible, but generally people need a car. So so we'll talk you through a few of the challenges we had with that, but it's certainly not insurmountable. And I think the final point I'll make before I hand over to Sue, I guess, is crucial to the success of the programme, was about understanding the values of each organisation, as well as the values needed to be successful working in social care. And I hope you can read the quote up there, but that's from the Chief Exec of Stockdale's organisation. So that's an organisation supporting children and adults with learning disabilities, based in Manchester. And what Emma describes there, I suppose, is how the programme has enabled a good fit for the person with the organisation and role, and how that's really helped them. So as I say, more of that later. So I will at this point hand over to Sue, who will talk a little bit more detail through the programme and what it involves.
Thanks, Jo. Next slide, please. Okay, so yeah, as Jo said, I'm going to now talk you through what's involved in the programme. As Jo mentioned, it is a fully funded entry-level work-based education programme, and it is aimed at people currently out of work or education who are interested in a career in social care, and I think as importantly, who have the values to work in social care. Our programme was very much values-led, and I think that massively helped in the sustainment of employment for staff that went into care. So the programme supports roles in care, catering, domestic, housekeeping, laundry and admin roles. We thought it would be best to open it up to all roles within social care as opposed to just care. And I think this came to light when the pandemic hit and organisations realised that they may only have 1, 2, possibly 3 people working in catering. So what if that member of staff went down due to COVID or had to isolate? They were then without a member of staff within that area. So, you know, it was massive for us to be able to support every single area within social care. The training was delivered via an online platform, and this made it accessible to all across Greater Manchester. So as Jo mentioned, in my pilot programme, we delivered this at Salford College, but this meant that within a GM-wide programme, if you didn't live in Salford or you lived in another area of Manchester, it could take over an hour to get to Salford College, which wasn't as accessible for some students. So having it online meant that we didn't need a venue, and it was accessible to everyone across Greater Manchester who wanted to be involved in the programme and considered for a role in social care. The training session took place via Zoom sessions. It has a Canvas platform with lots of resources and information, lots of breakout rooms and interaction. And it wasn't just an e-learning sort of training. It's live. There's tutors that are on Zoom, and it's face-to-face training via Zoom, videos, presentations. We made the training as interactive as possible, and it did create, during lockdown particularly, it did create sort of a family for our learners. Everybody got to know each other. They were really supportive, really engaged, and it was also educational as well. Next slide, please. So our learners enrol onto a 6-week education programme, and as I mentioned, this is done online distance learning with the WEA, and during that 6 weeks they partake in the knowledge elements of the care certificate, level 1 awareness, mental health awareness, and level 1 stress awareness, and an accredited qualification in infection control. They also cover employability skills, and during that time while they're on the programme, they undertake an enhanced DBS check, which is funded through the programme. I think it's important to mention that all the training that's in place was something we discussed with our social care providers. We discussed what they thought would be important for them and what would help them. And having the knowledge elements of the care certificate covered meant that it was a start to their mandatory training. So if they were taken on in a social care organisation, they'd already started the training, which the care certificate elements could be mapped into the rest of the care certificate. And the outcomes of the scheme of work conform to the mapping standards provided by Skills for Care, so that each learner could build a portfolio towards future qualifications they progressed within that organisation in their career. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, our programme Step Into Care is very much values-based, which involves a values-based application and interview process. It's at the heart of social care, recruitment, retention and development strategies. It's massively at the heart of social care. So a values-based approach was needed. I think, you know, you can train people to work in care, but you can't train values. Values come from within. So our learners completed a values-based application form, and every single learner was given an interview. And the reason why we did this is because some learners weren't that good at application forms. We wanted to meet every single person to decide whether they were right for the programme. The values-based interview took place via Zoom, and during that interview we discussed placement opportunities and what current vacancies we had. There was fixed term and permanent contract options, and we also discussed with our learners what area of work they aspired to work in, the hours that they could do, what travel they had during the pandemic particularly, but also post-pandemic as well, in regards to whether they were using public transport, how long it might take them to get to an area, whether they had childcare responsibilities, so that we could then find a vacancy or an opportunity that suited them around all the necessary requirements in their home life. Because again, a lot of our learners who had been out of work have struggled with childcare in the past. So we wanted to make sure we could support them as much as possible. We also provided an introductory meeting with the employer before they went out onto placement, which I'll discuss placements in a little bit more detail shortly. But I think the introductory meeting with an employer certainly brought the ice, supported the learner into that placement and made it less daunting for those that have been out of work for some time. Next slide, please. So the placement opportunity then, once a 6-week training is complete and the DBS is in place, it's a 24-hour placement, and that's probably 2 to 3 shifts depending on what the shifts were. So what we tried to do is to make the shifts relevant to that particular vacancy. So if a learner has gone for a vacancy that's 12-hour shifts, they would do 2 12-hour shifts or 3 8-hour shifts. And it enables the applicant to experience a social care environment, but it also gives the recruiting manager an opportunity to assess the suitability for that vacancy. We make sure as part of Step Into Care that we gain feedback throughout the placement, and we feed that back to our learner so that they know, you know, what they're doing is right or what they need to do just to pick up the pace a little bit. And the goal is to recruit to vacancies within the local community. We try to place our learners as near to a vacancy as possible, so we're keeping the social care workers within that local community. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm going to hand back to Jo now for outcomes and feedback.
Thanks, Sue. Okay, so just to give now, I suppose, a flavour of where we've got to so far. We've had 8 programmes. We're just on programme 9 now. I suppose the other point we make, they are quite small programmes, so these aren't huge, you know, programmes in terms of staffing of the Step Into Care programme. We've obviously got the team based at WEA that provide the education programme, but from a placement employer liaison sort of interview stage up until very recently, it was Sue. So we were always conscious that it wasn't a pilot, but we knew that it was about testing something, and I guess proving that it had the ability to grow, and that's what started to happen now. So we've got further staffing, and it's starting to develop. So just to kind of put a bit of perspective, I guess, around the scale of the programme to date. But effectively, through that programme, we've seen so much potential unlocked. Participants' confidence, self-esteem has grown, and Sue's got some amazing personal stories from people of current participants and previous participants coming back to explain what a difference it's made. And you'll have noticed throughout the presentation we've dropped a few of the kind of little quotes we've got from people who participated and some of the managers, some brilliant, amazing feedback on it. So at the point that we evaluated the programme earlier this year, we looked at the kind of proportions of people that that were successful through the programme. So at that point, when we looked at it, of those who'd expressed an interest in the education programme right at the start, 65% successfully completed that training programme. Of those, 79% then progressed onto a placement that Sue had matched them with an employer, and of those 82% successfully gained employment. So it was a really we felt it was a really successful scheme in terms of translating, if you like, people who are interested into actual jobs at the end of it. Could you move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So as I say, we're currently on programme 9. The figure on there has been updated, so I've got an updated figure as of today, and there's 62 residents have now been recruited through the programme, so over those first 8 programmes, and some of those were smaller programmes, so they weren't all kind of the full 6-week programme. That we did a number of smaller accelerated programmes too, but those individuals have come from a wide range of backgrounds: retail, hospitality, as I mentioned before, performing arts, hairdressing. We've had a tram driver who Sue will talk a little bit about as a case study later, but again, some amazing stories about how their skills have been kind of brought across into their new roles. So just as a couple of examples, a young guy who was a musician, who'd finished a music degree and was in bands. Obviously that all ended, so he got a role in I think so it was a care home, and was able to bring his music, if you like, into that. So the activities and so on that were happening in the home, he could bring his skills to that. And another, a barber, who was again able to support residents during the lockdown. So one of those things that we all kind of missed. It was about making people feel good and really, really valued. And I think there's a quote from the manager at the organisation that he moved into up shortly. But what we've also been able to do is previous participants have been actively involved as ambassadors for promoting careers in social care more generally, not just about Step Into Care. So the guy who was a musician I mentioned, he got involved in an interview with Radio Manchester as part of the national campaign that we did a sort of local, kind of spotlight. So he got involved in that and spoke on the radio, which was brilliant. And we've had a number of participants when we've gone out videoing people for for some of the comms that have gone out around the regional and national recruitment campaign, that have got involved in that as well, to sort of show what their roles involved to really sort of promote some of the careers and types of jobs that are available. Next slide, please. Okay, so looking at the workforce characteristics, again, this is something that we're really pleased around. And when we undertook the evaluation that I mentioned earlier, we also looked at what that workforce profile was for those coming into social care through the programme. And we feel we're helping to support the development of a more inclusive and sustainable workforce. So some of the examples there, really, that the proportion of social care staff from a BAME background in Greater Manchester is currently 15.4%. Step Into Care, they would represent 25% of applicants and 30% of successful applicants. So in terms of that translation into jobs, obviously that's really positive. Also, when we look at male carers, the national and regional average for the proportion of male carers in the sector is just 18%, and they are mainly in daycare and some supported living settings. That tends to be where most of the male care staff work. For Step Into Care, that rises to 28%, and that's the quote, I think, from Jack, who's the deputy manager at Equilibrium, which is a large mental health and learning disability provider in Greater Manchester. So that value of having a more balanced workforce. So we included the quote from him there to show how that's really kind of positive and helping providers. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, as I said right at the beginning, some of this was about being responsive to the challenges that providers were facing with recruitment. So I guess the programme really we feel it's really supported with recruitment and onboarding, and employers. We've had some great feedback from employers about that. So what they're saying is applicants that come through the programme are more likely to share their organisational values and have that passion to work in social care, and that's translated into retention improvements. Recruitment times were shorter, so again we took some of that DBS checks and so on away from the providers, so they were able to get people in much more quickly once we've made that match. As Sue mentioned, a lot of the mandatory training was already done. It was just about on the job organisational specific training. And it is showing a lower staff turnover. Staff turnover in social care is really quite high. It's about 30. It's over 30%. I think it's the latest was about 36-point-something% for Greater Manchester, and we know it's much higher in the first year and even more so in the first 6 months of employment. So turnover for the Step Into Care participants was actually lower than the average turnover within the first 6 months, if that makes sense. So what it's tending to show, obviously we've only got a fairly short period of time to look at, but it's starting to show that those who come in through Step Into Care seem to be more likely to stay in the organisation. And I'll hand back, I think, now to Sue, who's going to talk through some of the challenges we had and the benefits of the programme.
Thanks, Jo. We don't often get time to reflect back, do we, on work that we've done? And I think to sit here today and talk about this programme as we are doing is absolutely amazing. And I'm really quite proud of it myself, actually. And I just think it's brilliant that we're able to share it. Okay, so successful and responsive recruitment then.
The next slide, sorry, Sue. It's challenge it there.
There we go. Yeah, challenges, got you. Okay, so yeah, challenges. Of course, as Jo mentioned earlier, we did hit the ground running. We were planning the programme whilst we were delivering it back in the early stages when we first went into lockdown. So there was a lot of provider engagement. That was difficult because obviously our registered managers and staff were all on the floor working and doing what they could during the pandemic, but we managed to meet with registered managers and go to some of their meetings virtually over Teams so that we could promote the programme and get their vacancies and understand what they needed so we could support them. We did have early leavers, so you know, we had a lot of people, not a lot, but we had a number of people coming onto the programme, then deciding the programme wasn't for them, or deciding that because of the pandemic and the way the situation was, they were a little bit wary about going into a social care environment at that stage. Access to online training, so some of our learners didn't have access to a computer or they didn't have the internet. So at that stage, our training provider committed to loaning laptops and having Wi-Fi dongles as well available, so that there was more access openly available digitally to our learners. Delivering the programme while still planning, like I just said, we did have a plan in place, but as we delivered the programme, the plan changed, and it changed from week to week, month to month, until we got a sustainable programme that's now currently in place. Team's capacity. So we didn't envisage that this programme would be as big as it is, and obviously from a careers hub point of view, our team was very small. It was one person, that was me delivering the programme. But since then, because of the programme and the outcomes and the massive support that is given, we've been able to now recruit a coordinator to the programme with admin support as well, which means that we can now work on making this programme even bigger and better than it already is. Each organisation recruits slightly differently as well. So obviously we were working with over 100 social care providers across Greater Manchester, some independent, some large organisations. So their recruitment process was slightly differently in regards to the DBS check and everything else that was involved, but we supported each organisation as best we could from a different point of view. Public transport, again, from a pandemic point of view, a lot of the public transport was laid off. There was only half the amount of public transport, so we had to work with our learners to look at how they could access an area, where they could get to, where wasn't available, so that we could make sure that they were able to get there and the travel to be sustainable for them onwards. And syncing vacancies with applicants. This programme is of massive interest to a lot of people across Greater Manchester, with lots of people wanting to be involved. And it was matching applicants in the right areas to the vacancies. And if we got applicants that came onto the programme that had the values to work in care and we didn't want to lose them, what we'd do then was go out there to social care providers, and we did this via social media. I had a lot of presence on LinkedIn to say, look, we've got an amazing person, they want to work in care, have you got a vacancy? And this enabled us then to match with organisations that first of all hadn't engaged with the programme, but secondly to make sure that we didn't lose these fantastic applicants that all had the values to work in care. Next slide, please. So the benefits then, well, I think Jo's already mentioned that it massively supported social care during a really difficult time. Social care needs that support for recruitment anyway, but during a pandemic, most certainly it did. Our students engaged really well via the online platform. They had WhatsApp groups. It was very much a community of students all pulling together for the same aim. No venue to source, like I mentioned before, for training, so it was much easier to enable all applicants, all learners, from across the whole of Greater Manchester to get involved with the programme, because we had vacancies across Greater Manchester. The ability to easily deliver the programme across Greater Manchester wasn't a problem, no matter where you lived. A quicker turnaround into employment. As soon as the training was completed, we made sure the adult first check was in place, the placement was planned, and that took place. After 24 hours, there was an employment outcome confirmed, and then straight on into the boarding process for recruitment. Providers prefer the shorter placement, definitely. And my pilot program, it was 6 weeks. I think it was 6 weeks at college and 5 weeks on placement. Providers said that they didn't need 5 weeks. They knew after 24-hour placement if that person had the values and were right for their organisation, which also meant that our learners were going into employment and earning money much quicker than they would normally in a sector-based work academy. And the outcomes have been really positive. Joe's already confirmed what the outcomes are, and I myself am so proud of the people that have been on the programme and how they continue to fly the flag for social care. Next slide, please. So I just want to share with you now a couple of our past learners. So this gentleman here is called Wayne, and Wayne was in his late 50s, early 60s when he came onto the programme. He'd been a tram driver for Metrolink in Manchester for many years, and due to the pandemic, he was made redundant. He actually said to me when he came onto the programme, and I interviewed him, that he'd always thought about a career in care, but he never knew whether he could do it or not. And now he felt that because of his age, he didn't really think that anybody was going to take him on. He amazed everybody. He was fantastic. He acted as a peer throughout the training side of the process for the online training with students. He went into Aspire on his placement, and this was supporting people with learning disabilities, and he absolutely loved it. They snapped him up, and he's still there to this day. Wayne's doing fantastically well. He's progressing in his career. It must be nearly 12 months now since he went into employment, and he's never looked back. Wayne does keep in touch with us regularly. Aspire say, he's a fantastic colleague. They wish they had 10 of Wayne. He's amazing. And Wayne said, if he'd have thought about this earlier on in life, he'd have gone into social care much earlier, but he'd never considered it, first as a man and secondly, as a career for him. But it proved him wrong when he came onto the programme. Next slide, please. So now we've also got this lovely lady. So this lady is Emily, and Emily aspires to be a paramedic, and I'm sure she'll get there one day. Emily's a single parent, and she came onto the programme because she didn't want to just be on benefits. She wanted to work, and she knew that being a paramedic right now isn't something she could do with a small child. So when she first came onto the programme, Emily didn't have a lot of confidence, and the 6 weeks on the programme, we watched her bloom, really. Her confidence grew. Her knowledge in the area, even though she hadn't worked in care, was phenomenal. Her values were definitely there, and we supported her into a part-time role, and that was with possibilities, again, supported living, working with people with learning disabilities. And during a placement, she did fantastically well, and they confirmed her an employment offer before a placement even ended. Emily's now working there and managing to work alongside having a son as a single parent. And she still does aspire to work as a paramedic in the future. And I think all the experience and what she's gaining now while she's working will massively support her in her aspirations going forward. Yeah, that's that one. Okay, next slide, please. And that's it, really. Yeah, that's it, Joe. I'll let you go now. I think we need to just look at questions, don't we?
Absolutely. I've obviously I put my contact details down there, so if anybody wanted to get in touch, sort of know a bit more detail or discuss, I'm assuming you'll get a copy of the slides, so you'll be able to contact me. I've just popped the chat box up. I can't see any questions, so I don't know if that's my Zoom being strange today, or whether we haven't got any questions. I don't know. Sue, can you check and see if you can see any?
Yeah, I'm just checking now. No, I don't think we do have any questions. These are all from prior, I think, before 12:30. So yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Would anybody like to pop some in the chat? Doesn't look like it, does it? Bit of feedback. Has anybody got any views on what we've done on the programme to date, and how we think it might be duplicated across the country?
And obviously, I suppose the principles of it can be applied. We've been in conversations with people in different sectors around it. Yeah. Obviously within health settings, but also, and Sue, the organisation that Sue works for, Manchester Foundation Trust. So I know that there's mutual learning, isn't there? I think to to sharing some of that learning.
Absolutely.
Somebody that's you link in with Proud to Care. Is Proud to Care, is that the organisation in the Southwest? Devon, yes. Oh, I was right. South, I've got that right. Yeah, Southwest. No, but when I talked early on about the development of a social care academy, we're really interested in that model, because we do think, I know Skills for Care actually put us in touch, and so I think whilst it's not something we've linked in with around Step Into Care specifically, in the development of a Greater Manchester, or actually a regional, so a Northwest sort of academy approach, and certainly around getting people into social care, we really like that model. So we will be doing, I suppose, is the answer to that question. Thanks, Alice. Any more?
Okay.
I think we're about to be moved into the I know the 5-minute countdown popped up.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
Well,
move back in.
yeah, I know people aren't speaking, but thanks everyone for joining us. We really appreciate your time in listening to us today. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you.